Well, it seems that someone has been kind enough to give us a glimpse of the Tau Codex early. It seems that the vast majority of the Codex has just been leaked to Reddit, so let's talk Markerlights, Septs rules and crisis equipment, and see what Tau are looking like in the new decks. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking more Tau, and Games Workshop leak season really seems to continue in full force. There barely seems to be a day going by now where things aren't coming out either officially or unofficially. These leaks come from the Tau Reddit. There seems to be a nice person called Codex Cat, and he's basically been just sat around answering everyone's questions on the new Codex. He's been asked not to show any pictures from the Codex, but has been going through quite a lot of the leaks, confirming some things, clarifying some others, talking about some new and powerful rules mechanics, and to me all of this seems very believable indeed, and if they were making it up then they've been ridiculously creative, and could probably write a Codex just as well as Games Workshop. Just to add a little bit more evidence that they do have the book, they've included a nice picture of their cat with the Codex, and I think that getting cute pet pictures alongside Warhammer leaks just makes it so much better in my eyes. Loads of interesting stuff to talk about, so thank you very much Mr. Codex Cat, and to your cat for posing so nicely for us. I'll leave a link to the original Tau Reddit where this was posted, and in the meantime we'll go through the new rules. Probably the biggest headlines are the big changes to Markerlights, new Tau Septs traits, and just a massive amount of clarification to various units and rules. We've got new Tau commanders, battlesuit wargear, plasma rifles, seeker missiles, hammerhead points, a bit more about drones, new ethereal litany abilities, and plenty more interesting snippets and stratagems. With leaks like this coming out so soon, I strongly suspect that this book is going to be coming very soon indeed, so I'm sure we'll have the full picture before very long. I will of course be reviewing the Codex in full just as soon as I can, so feel free to subscribe to Warspets Tactics if you'd like to see that at a later date. In any case, let's get straight into it, and we'll start out with those Markerlights. So Markerlights were one of the biggest question marks that we had about the new Codex. Most of the other big army-wide mechanics have been revealed. To be honest, I do feel like I'd called this one quite well. I strongly suspected that Markerlights will give you a lot easier access to +1 to hit, and indeed that seems to be what they do. The rules are a bit less complicated, but still seem nice and powerful. The only slightly weird thing about them is that Markerlights now have to be fired as a weird sort of action, but as actions go it's really not all that restrictive. If you've got a Markerlight unit, then at the start of the movement phase you can declare that they're doing this action. Anything with the infantry tag will have to stay still, but vehicles, drones and pathfinders all sound like they can move without the action failing. It being an action does have some restrictions though. I believe it means that you won't be able to fire Markerlights if you're falling back or advancing. Then when you get to the start of the shooting phase, for every Markerlight model in the unit, you get to select an enemy model within 36 inches, you roll a dice and on a 3+, that unit gains a Markerlight token. Kind of nice as it means that they're applied quite consistently, negative to hit penalties aren't going to stop you from hitting people with Markerlights, and it doesn't sound like it's going to interfere with the rest of the unit's shooting either. It does sound like if you're playing Pathfinders for example, you should be able to apply Markerlights and then fire with your pulse carbines. Obviously we'll have to double check all that when the full rules are out. I don't know if there's any other sort of limits, like how many Markerlight tokens you can stack on one unit. In any case, when the rest of your units are shooting, then you can expend these Markerlight tokens for +1 to hit each time a Tau Empire unit fires at that enemy. It means that you don't just cover one unit in Markerlight tokens, then all of your army gets that benefit. One Markerlight token will directly improve one Tau Empire unit shooting at the squad. Personally, I feel that's quite good and really quite powerful. It means that just literally one chap with a Markerlight could mean that an entire massive battlesuit squad is hitting on 3s now. That's far better than having absolutely loads of Markerlights had to dedicate to get up to that improved ballistic skill, and it cuts down on a little bit of the complexity of having to go through that big 5-point table and decide which buffs were or weren't useful. At least from this though, it does sound like they're not going to be providing hit rerolls or any sorts of ignores cover. Overall though, I do really quite like it. I think you'll still absolutely want Markerlights in the army, as if you can get a cheap hit on an enemy with one, it's going to make one powerful Tau unit shooting just massively more efficient. I'm sure there'll be some other interactions, maybe with seeker missiles perhaps, and apparently Markerlight tokens won't any longer be able to affect Overwatch anymore. They disappear at the end of your shooting phase, so no getting massively souped up Overwatch. Next up we come to the Septs. It appears that we have traits for the big 6 here. Quite a few of them have been really quite extensively reimagined, which I think is kind of good, as there were just a few really obvious picks before, and a lot of them were just neglected. Delith is apparently the only Sept that affects auxiliary units. They are the Sept that's best known for working with them. Apparently infantry units will get light cover at range, and it allows you to regain Montcar and Coyon with the alien auxiliaries like Kroot and Vespid. Just as an aside, Mr. Codex Katz did mention that anything smaller than a ghost kill will gain the infantry keyword, so that could easily mean that crisis suits and broadsides might gain infantry, and that could make them a bit more useful for Delith. For Borkan, you get plus 4-inch range to your guns, and ranged attacks versus vehicles that are strength 7 or less count as -1 strength. The range boost is slightly helpful, though admittedly quite a lot of the Tau Codex does seem to have fairly good ranges already. The -1 strength thing is kind of weird, certainly helps out against things like autocannons or mid-strength damage, and certainly means that battlesuits won't take as much firepower to small arms. Viola apparently gives you a plus 2-inch move when you're wholly within your deployment zone on turn 1, and also re-roll advance and charge rolls. I must admit I'm not entirely enthused about that if that's the extent of their rules. Obviously their warlord trait stratagems and things might influence that though. For Tau Sept, it seems that there's no longer any mention of the 5+ Overwatch. You get to re-roll 1 hit or wound roll when you're attacking, and you get plus 3 inches to auras and command phase abilities. I am wondering as to the state of the Overwatch in the Tau Empire Codex. They did seem to imply that it might well be gone as an army-wide mechanic. Maybe the army-wide thing is going to be getting 5+ Overwatch and you still have to pay the stratagem now. I'm sure that wouldn't be a very popular change, but to be honest it's not like pure shooting armies can't do very well in 9th edition anymore. I think the Admech Codex when it first dropped kind of proved that you can do fine with nothing but loads of guns. Next up, the Farside Enclaves always counts as getting a Markerlight token within 12 inches, so they should be hitting on 3s then, and they also get to reroll a wound roll when attacking. Pretty good for the damage output there, particularly with very high strength weapons. And Sakia seems to get dense cover on vehicles at greater than 18-inch range. Infantry get light cover at greater than 12 inches, and there's no penalty for shooting in engagement range with things like battlesuits or vehicles. Again, could be pretty interesting if the small battlesuits are indeed infantry, and it would be quite nice if everything either became an infantry or a vehicle choice. I think it'd make the battlesuits a bit more neat and fitting in with everything else in 40k. Overall, I think they all look interesting. I think Farside Enclave still looks like one of the most fun choices. Reliably hitting on 3s all the time is pretty nice, even if you do have to go for some close range strikes. Next up we have some guns and wargear, and perhaps one of the other biggest questions was the plasma rifle profile. If this is accurate, then it's a change that I really wasn't expecting. A single shot at Assault 1, Strength 8, AP -4 and flat damage 3. This would be really quite a big pivot for them. I honestly expected them to keep rapid fire and go to damage 2 or something, being more of an elite infantry killer like they've usually been. They certainly sound like they still will do elite infantry, but this profile just seems like it's a bit more of a dedicated anti-vehicle weapon, and looks like it might well compete with the fusion blaster. A little bit more range, not getting the melter rule, but also less swingy damage. Apparently as crisis suits will apparently have to pay more for duplicate weapons, this could be a good one to combine though. It could make you a decent anti-tank suit with a plasma rifle and a fusion blaster. Broadside rail rifles are heavy 2 at strength 9, AP -4, damage D3+3. 6s cause a mortal wound, and they don't get to ignore invul saves like that mighty railgun. Apparently that's the only weapon in the codex that can do so, so at least it's not a mechanic that literally everything in the codex is picking up. Kind of expected changes there, that's well in line with the massive anti-tank weapons elsewhere in 40k. Seeker missiles are 72-inch range, heavy 1 shots at strength 9, AP -3 and damage 2d3. As expected they only get 1 shot each, but there's no mention of getting worse ballistic skill if they fire without Markerlight tokens. I'll be interested to know whether or not they still depend on Markerlights to being fired accurately. They do apparently have a stratagem that we'll get onto, and apparently the Skyray missile rack gets D3+1 shots at this profile. Just on the face of it, it doesn't sound like you can fire them all at once or run out of missiles now. Again though, certainly needs a bit more rules clarification. Vespid neutron blasters are 18-inch, assault 2, strength 5, AP -3, damage 2. Pretty much dedicated space marine killers. Apparently they're toughness 4 with a 4+ save now, and they're only 12 points per model, which doesn't seem too bad for their firepower. For battlesuit wargear, again another one of my suspicions does seem to be confirmed. As I mentioned with that previewed counter-fire defense system, it does seem that the majority of battlesuit support systems are now free. You get 1 per battlesuit, and apparently the only one that you pay for an upgrade for is the shield generator, which costs a little bit more. According to this, the battlesuits get 3 hard points for weapon systems, 1 support system for free, and a 30 points per model at 4 wounds now. Support system wise, the ATS is now just completely gone. You can't just pick up AP -1 for an auto-include buff to damage. Counter-fire defense systems give you the keyword for that stratagem, as GW previewed. 1 CP to make 1 successful wound into a damage 1 attack. Not too bad if you get struck by something damage D3+3. A multi-tracker gives you exploding 6s to hit against big units with 6 or more models in. A target lock gives you ignore light cover. A velocity tracker gives you +1 to hit against the fly keyword. That one seems quite nice if it's free. A shield generator gives you a 4+ invul save, 5 points for crisis suits, 10 points for commanders. It's built into the Storm Surge and the Riptide. And the early warning override allows you a 5+ overwatch, and the overwatch stratagem costs 1 command point less when it's used on this unit. For a free support system, that does sound excellent, but it does sound like it's bad news for the rest of the Tau, as it means that you might have to pay command points for overwatch, and it does sound like most of the army won't be hitting on 5s. In any case, it does sound like you could basically get free overwatch on a unit of crisis suits hitting on 5s for basically a free upgrade, so it seems almost mandatory that you might want to include one of these in the squad. I wonder if their supporting fire special rule might be some sort of rule that when overwatch is fired, you can also fire overwatch with other units nearby. It wouldn't be quite as flexible, but with these changes it does sound like it could be a possibility. Finally, Iridium Armor is +10 points for a 2+ save, and it's not a support system. You can have it 1 in every 3 models like before, so it can be quite handy if you do want a nice tanking crisis suit to take some damage for the team. Overall, it seems like for the support systems, it might be a bit better to take a mix of different ones now. Certainly having 1 early warning override in the squad seems like it could be good, the same potentially with 1 counter-fire defense system, and if you just want the chance for some more damage against certain targets, target locks or velocity trackers could be fun. Moving on, and we've got some more details on some units. Apparently the Storm Surge remains 330 points base, really not too dissimilar from how it is now. The Pulse Blast Cannon does cost more than this, but the Driver Cannon is the base option, getting heavy D3 shots at strength 10, AP -4 and damage 3. I can only assume it must be cheaper than the Blast Cannon, as that profile still seems like it's worse than the Blast Cannon's weaker profile, so it wouldn't be too surprising if you do have to pay some points for the privilege of that crazy damage 12 shot. They do seem very certain that the Storm Surge will be getting a 4+ invul save, not a 5+ as I guessed before. In the context of the Toughness 8 2+ save and more wounds that Games Workshop promised, it does seem like it's going to be an absolute powerhouse. Maybe this might be an example of a super heavy that actually sees a lot of play. For commanders, there's some really quite interesting changes. They all apparently get captain style rerolls to hit of 1. That's a bit more meaningful now Markerlights don't work in the same way. The Enforcer suit gets an automatic -1 damage ability, and the XV8 commanders and Farsight can give out a buff for battle suits to shoot and charge after falling back. That's a really nice and helpful ability for Tau Empire indeed. I think that's a really helpful ability for leading crisis suits. It means that you can be a bit more brave with them without having to lock them up and just fire at the unit in combat. I feel like that could be a popular choice to escort crisis suits in general. In addition, Farsight apparently gives a fun buff of +1 to hit in melee, and his Dawn Blade is flat damage 3 with a sweep attack mode for dealing with hordes. Shadow Sun on the other hand is a supreme commander, and she can give out the Chapter Master style buff for 4 rerolls to hit for a core unit. You can still only take 1 battlesuit commander per detachment, though Farsight Enclaves still get 2. Perhaps one of the most concerning things is that from this, Hammerheads are reportedly 145 points base. If that is indeed true, then it would even be cheaper than the current version, even though the Railgun has those crazy stats that we saw previewed. No mention of it dropping to Ballistic Skill 4+ or anything, so I'm going to guess it remains a 3+ until proven otherwise. And apparently the Ion Cannon costs slightly more than the Railgun at +10 points, though honestly with its profile that we'll get onto in a second, I don't see why you'd take the Ion Cannon over the Railgun. And it does indeed look that spamming 3 Hammerheads in an otherwise fairly balanced list could be pretty viable. If they really are only 145 points each, then having those 3 enormous Railgun shots seem like they could be great, and you still have lots of other points to deal with other targets beyond heavies. I guess we still need to see any context to the rest of the rules, and whether or not Hammerheads are indeed the most efficient firepower in the Codex. Even with ignore invuls and a massive damage characteristic, there might be plenty of things that are more efficient and see more play. But still, that could well be bad news for certain armies. I'm sure Imperial Knights won't be looking forward to fighting a trio of Hammerheads every Tau game. As we mentioned, Crisis Suits are 30 points per model. They're 4 wounds now, sorry not toughness 4, that was a typo, and their normal squad size is 3 to 6 rather than 3 to 9. Apparently the Sun Shark's getting upgunned. They get up to 12 ion rifle shots that can overcharge, plus a bomb that sounds quite similar to the power of the Archaeopter Fuselage, getting 66 shots for a 4+ mortal wound, or going up to 10 shots for bigger squads. A couple of random points costs as well. Shield drones are 12 points, lose their feel no pain, but from a leaked datasheet it does appear that they're 2 wounds now, so a bit more tanky with that 4+ invul. And ghost kills are 160 points now, can't gain a shield generator, but are otherwise quite tough to remove. Now getting into some stratagems and just more random bits and bobs that were answers to specific questions. Nova reactors apparently no longer deal damage to their own unit when you use them, but they instead have a chance of burning out and not functioning for the rest of the game. Apparently they can give a boost of 5+ fail no pain type save, a couple of other benefits, but you can no longer get the 3+ invul save. Games Workshop just in general doesn't like 3+ invuls on really massive things these days, and that really doesn't come as a surprise to me that it was removed. Apparently save protocols also can't affect Riptides anymore, so Riptides are likely to be standing on their own 2 feet durability wise rather than using the 3+ and the drones. Hopefully that might come with a bit of a points reduction for them. I feel like they were overinflated just due to being very hard to kill. Talking of save protocols, it now apparently is a stratagem, so just cloaking the centre of the army in a whole ton of shield drones just isn't really as viable a strategy anymore. Probably not the worst thing for the army's playstyle though. I don't think many people are wanting to go back to 8th edition where you basically just shot shield drones all game. The drones must be within 3 inches or 6 inches with a drone controller. The drones will die as part of the stratagem, and Riptides and Storm Surges can't use it. It does seem like drones are actually part of the unit for quite a lot of units out there now, so a lot of the time it's just going to be the option to tank cheap shots on the drones rather than risk it on your more valuable models. That seems like a really nice option on shield drones, particularly with their 2 wounds. It seems like the Seeker Missile Markerlight thing might have become a stratagem. No command point cost was mentioned, so it could be 1 or 2, but it allows a unit with a Markerlight token to get struck by a Seeker Missile. It can fire even if the Seeker unit can't even see the target, and you get +1 to wound against it. It's not exactly true ignores line of sight shooting though, as your Markerlight unit needs to be able to see their target. Devilfish apparently have a reroll 1s to hit stratagem that affects Fire Warriors and Breachers. Could be quite good fun for a Fish of Fury approach, and apparently there's also a stratagem to allow you to disembark a squad after they've been transported. That could be really quite good fun for ramming a Devilfish into the middle of the board, getting the squad out and rapid firing pulse weapons. Could be a decent way to help Tau take some central objectives as well, even better than the Breacher squads that they have currently. For the Fireblade, I'm not sure whether this is his base aura or a stratagem, but apparently he can get an order of exploding 6s to hit with pulse weapons. Seems like that could be a perfectly reasonable thing to have as his base ability rather than the extra shots thing. Usually that's going to be a 1/3 increase to the firepower of Fire Warrior units, so a pretty sweet buff if it can go down on multiple squads. There's then the mention of 4 different pulse weapon stratagems. Apparently if they remain in combat they can be pistol too. Could be a way of dealing some nasty surprise damage to an enemy that nuisance charges you and you don't want to fall back. Unmodified 6s to hit can apparently cause an auto wound. Strike teams can get rapid fire up to 36 inches and an extra pip of AP. Breachers can ignore cover and get full rerolls to wounds. All of those sound like pretty excellent buffs. It just remains to be seen whether or not there'll be 1 command point or 2 CP. That's really going to make a big difference as to how good they are. Prototype weapons, the ones that you can upgrade for command points at the moment, are now a points cost upgrade instead. They can still affect a whole bunch of different units throughout the Tau army, and apparently work quite similarly to the Black Templar's single model relics. That's quite good news in my opinion. That's a really nice rule. Next up, Ethereals are apparently becoming the Tau chaplains. Similar to quite a lot of other armies, they now have a litany-like ability. They get to know 2 of their invocations and cast 1 on a 3+. I believe that they'll usually be able to affect core and character units. That tends to be par for the course for these litany-like abilities, and perhaps the pick of them is that Sense of Stone, which apparently gives you a 5+ feel no pain type save. That could be absolutely massive if you can apply that to a big unit of battle suits. He did say that this should work on either crisis suits or broadsides, which does imply to me that broadsides might indeed be core infantry, and are likely going to be one of the best units to focus buffs on. Otherwise, some of the other options are just simply gaining 1 command point. That seems pretty nice to me. A +1 to wound 1 for an auxiliary unit, a -1 to hit for a core infantry unit that's stationary, and an option to shoot while doing actions. Out of those, I still like the 5+ feel no pain best, but gaining a command point or a -1 to hit could both be pretty nice. For the broadsides, high yield missile pods also get AP -2. They do seem like pretty big generalist weapons now, though I guess they always were previously. It'd be interesting seeing which people take out of them out of those boosted rail rifles or the missiles. And perhaps in one of the worst bits of news in the Codex, apparently the Farsight Enclaves don't have a major rules section in here. Kind of a shame, as they're just such a widely played faction, and they had really quite a lot of content from their supplement in that Greater Good book. My instincts for that are that Games Workshop are going to release a supplement for them at a later date. I strongly suspect that they'll be reappearing in one of those 40k Seasons Warzone books in a slightly annoying cash grabby supplement, so apparently no fusion blades or things until then. Finally, as I briefly mentioned earlier, apparently Crisis Suit weapons get a bit more expensive for every duplicate one you have on the same model, so it sounds like it might really encourage having 3 different ones, maybe a cyclic ion blaster, plasma rifle and fusion blaster perhaps. With split fire it doesn't really seem like that would be too big of a problem and could make a really nice generalist threat shooting unit. Finally, the ion cannon at this rumoured profile is 3d3 shots, strength 7 going to strength 8, AP -2, and apparently just damage 1 going to damage 2 if it overcharges, for plus 10 points over that slightly godly railgun. I do wonder why they've bothered with this. It seems like a side grade on its previous profile at best, as previously it had fewer shots but they were at flat damage 3. To go back to what I mentioned earlier, apparently hammerheads do have a 4+ ballistic skill now, not a 3+. Sorry, I know I mentioned that earlier in the video, but I've just seen a clarification from one of the other questions. So overall, that's just an enormous amount of Tau leaks, and a crazy amount of content to try and digest. I feel like we're not going to know the full picture until we know the entire codex with all the points cost and things, but it certainly puts a lot of things in perspective, and in particular knowing some things like commander abilities and Markerlights do help put the rest of the codex in context. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you've seen any errors or further corrections, please post them. There was an awful lot of information, I haven't caught every single bit, so feel free to go through to the original Reddit thread and have a read if you'd like to see every single bit. Overall though, Tau shooting is looking pretty fearsome, as you'd expect, and a lot of underused weapons, options and units do look like they might have another go at being good again. As I said, I'll review the full codex on the channel when we get it, so feel free to subscribe to Septs Tactics if you'd like to see that, or any more new leaks and rumours that we get before then. Finally, if you'd like to help support the channel, I would just like to mention that Septs Tactics does have a Patreon page. You can find that down in the video description below. Making all these videos does take an enormous amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is massively appreciated. The channel's Patreon is what allows me the time to make all of these videos happen. I do try and give some rewards to Patreons, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.